Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Film for Fans podcast, the podcast from movie fans for movie fans. I am your host, Ryan Dunlevy. That is my co-host, Rob Dunham.
And we love movies.
And we love movies.
And we love talking about movies.
That's right.
And we're actually both in the same place at the same agreed upon time.
Yes. A little behind the scenes, we did not have a podcast last week because I forgot to be home when the stated podcast recording time happened, and Rob got left on my porch.
I had a real good time sitting out in the cold. Have probably developed a cold because of it, but hey, it's good to sit and relax and look at the city every once in a while.
So that's why you wanted to make sure we did it in person.
Fairly decent view outside the porch, I gotta say. It's a nice city view.
Yeah, it's good cityscape.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
But we are back and we are in person and we are having a good time. And we're going to get ready to talk about massive box office season of Thanksgiving and the things that follow it immediately after. So we will, of course, give you our box office update. We'll preview a couple of movies coming out this weekend. Rob has some interesting things for us, a little bit of a game, and then a discussion about movie productions that he's going to bring to us. And of course, we will have our watch list to close out the podcast. All right, Rob. When last we journeyed together talking about the box office, we previewed what looked like was going to be a big Thanksgiving Day weekend.
Boy, was that an understatement?
But it turns out we were wrong. No, it's huge. It's ginormous. It's way bigger than anyone anticipated by far. Unbelievable. Let me just read you the numbers. This is the numbers for the 5-day Thanksgiving weekend. The big movie that came out was, of course, Moana 2. And we previewed that it was trending to be a very high mark. What did we say? 180 million, maybe?
But
180
it did more
million?
than that.
It did $225 million on its 5-day opening weekend over Thanksgiving. $225 million opening weekend. That's staggering. That's a staggering number. And when you combine this with some of the other movies, which we'll get to in a moment, this was the biggest Thanksgiving weekend for the box office. Ever.
Are movies back?
That is the question. Are movies back?
Is this the John Wick moment for movie theaters?
Unbelievable. So this was the biggest Thanksgiving Day release ever. It was the biggest Thanksgiving Day weekend ever. And it's just stunning. It's stunning. Everybody went to the movies.
Yeah. Now, I will say of the three, Gladiator 2 is probably the straggler of these three movies financially. However, how many times have there been three movies in the box office at the same time that a large portion of the movie-going audience wanted to go see?
We talked about it the last time we were at the rarity with which two movies in the box office made at least $40 million. It had three, including one of them at $225 million. Okay, so let's go through the remaining top five here for Thanksgiving Day. 5 days. These are the 5-day weekend numbers. Wicked, $118 million. 2-week total of $263 million. Gladiator 2 finished third, $44 million. $111 million for its 2 weeks. Red 1, $18.5 million, $75 million for its 3 weeks in the box office. The best Christmas pageant ever came in fifth at $4.8 million. That movie has done $31 million. These are unbelievable numbers. Yeah. Unbelievable numbers. Just to, we often do like comparisons about what's the drop off from week 1 to week 2. They aren't particularly available because of the 5-day weekend. So I pulled just the weekend numbers. So this is just Friday through Sunday of Thanksgiving Day weekend to compare Wicked and Gladiator to what they were the previous week. Wicked dropped off 27%.
That's insane.
27% from week 1 to week 2. As longtime followers will know 55% would be about the average. If you're down around 50, that's good. If you're up at 60, that's starting to get bad. 27, almost no drop off after a monster opening weekend. Gladiator 2 only dropped off 43%. Crazy. And that number is also even mitigated because most people didn't feel the need to have to go on the actual weekend because they had the 5-day weekend. So those numbers are probably actually even a little bit better, like had you squeezed it all into a weekend. So Thanksgiving Day was massive, to say the least. Now, do you want to comment on that now, or do you want to wait till we get through the numbers from this weekend?
Well, we can wait.
Okay. So now there was a predictable slight falling off post Thanksgiving Day weekend, because when literally everybody goes to the theaters, it's going to be lesser the next weekend. So last weekend, Moana 2 finished number one again at $51.2 million. Now that was a 63% drop off. Understandable, given the massive amount pulled in at Thanksgiving and the fact that everyone was off. Most people went to see it opening weekend. So while that is unusual and large to say, that would be troubling. I don't think it's as troubling given how successful the opening weekend was. Yeah. Wicked again finished number two with $36 million. That was a 55% drop off. So it's even in week 3 now. Its drop offs are still very good. So $322 million for Wicked in 3 weeks. Gladiator finished third again, $12.5 million for $132 million. Number 4 was an interesting one. Pushpa, The Rule Part 2 is Indian cinema. First weekend of Indian cinema for this movie, $9.3 million. Indian cinema, definitely here to stay. There's new ones almost every weekend. It's interesting.
Yeah.
We don't comment on them very much because we don't go to them. Yeah. But it is a.
I think there was one last year I went to because it was like a horror movie.
Yeah.
But other than that,
I went to one that was kind of half up. It was the Dev Patel. Was it Monkey Man?
Yeah.
Which was designed for American cinema, but it really was heavily Indian cinema. Number 5 was Red One, was $7 million. $85 million for Red One. Pretty solid for a holiday comedy. I included number 6 in here because I thought this was fascinating too. The re-release of Interstellar did $4.6 million. Keep in mind, this is an IMAX release. This was not in general theaters. This was only for IMAX. So the 10th anniversary of Interstellar did $4.6 million in its first weekend at the box office since its re-release. That's pretty phenomenal. And they're keeping it around too. It was I think originally just supposed to be that one weekend. It's still in theaters, in the IMAX theaters. Now, unfortunately for us, the closest one's King of Prussia.
Yeah.
So, I'm planning on going to see it next week. But
we do what we must.
That I included that one because I thought that's fascinating. An IMAX only release of a movie for its 10th anniversary did $4.6 million. Pretty phenomenal. So what are your comments? What are your thoughts on this in general?
So Red One at 85 is not bad, but we mentioned this before that it did have a production budget of like $250 million. So
it did. Why it did, I don't know.
There's no way it's going to get close to making enough money based on what it costs to make.
Yeah.
But and having watched the movie, I'm not really sure how it could have made that cost that much to make.
It's funny because I have talked to some people who really liked it. I'm like, no, I didn't see it, but I talked to a bunch of people who didn't like it. So
I like it. However, I think like 95% of the production budget must have gone to paying Chris Evans and The Rock because I don't really see how they could have spent that much money on that movie unless it's money laundering, which certainly possible in Hollywood.
You never know. Very, very rare stuff that we've seen over the past couple of weeks. I mean, I think the theme, we'll get back to this because soon we'll end up doing our year-end reviews, not too terribly long from now. But I think the theme has to be like massive successes and massive failures. And we just got more massive successes.
Mm-hmm.
But just the unprecedented nature of having three movies doing as well as they're doing at the same time is, wow, pretty crazy.
Yeah, and I'm very curious now what the audience for Wicked 2 is going to be next because that's coming next Thanksgiving. Is it going to push on from this and have such a huge response again? Is it going to be a bigger response? Is it going to be less because people aren't invested? I really don't know what the answer to that is.
My guess is that it will do even better because I haven't heard anybody who went to see it who didn't like it. Now, some people like me weren't really interested and didn't go.
Yeah.
But everyone I've talked to who went to it loved it. No negative responses I've heard from anybody.
Yeah.
So to me, that leads me to believe that the audience will just increase for part two.
I mean, the theater nerd crowd is strong. There are a lot of people who like Broadway. And the one thing that I'll say for sure about the movie is that it stayed very true to the musical, which I think is one of the reasons why it's gotten such a positive response from people who like the musical. So
yeah, it's really interesting. I don't know what to make of where we're at with the box office right now. It was a rough year for movies in general. Like there just wasn't a ton of good stuff that really came out. But I think once, and I wonder if there was just like an underlying like, oh, I'd love to go to the movies. Oh, there's not really anything in it. I'd love to go to the movies. Oh, there's this coming out. Okay, now we'll go. I wonder if there's a little bit of that. Like people are longing to go to movies, but aren't being satisfied by what they're being given. And then when they're given something they actually are interested in, then they're flooding the theaters and be like, more of this, please. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like if you make movies that people want to go see, they'll go see them. What a weird idea.
Yeah, like that just doesn't seem right.
Yeah. Who would do that?
Yeah, I don't know, man. Got to please the updated Oscar crowd.
Yeah, and this is why Nosferatu is going to make $1,000 million.
As we'll get to in a second, it is the Christmas of Aaron Taylor Johnson.
Yes.
So, yeah, interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah, I saw another trailer today for Nosferatu. I'm like, it's just so weird that this is like Christmas Day. Come see Nosferatu. Seriously. You know, open up the gifts, get the kids ready, drive the theater, see Nosferatu.
See, my family, one of our traditions is that we go to a movie on Christmas Day, something we do. And both my kids have voted to go to the Wicked sing-along, which if you don't know, that's going to be a thing.
Oh.
Starting Christmas Day through January 2nd, there will be showings of Wicked where words on the screen encouraging you to sing along.
Interesting.
Because they had many people sing along when they didn't want them to sing along.
Well, that's good work on the fly there.
And my son's backup is Sonic 3. And maybe I'll just let them go to Wicked and I'll go watch Nosferatu.
There you go. There you go.
They'll come out all happy and I'll be like,
yeah. So it will be interesting because I think the Thanksgiving Day releases were clearly bigger than the Christmas releases. So I don't know what that means for what's going to happen the rest of December. I'm guessing not much.
Yeah, the one that's a little up in the air for me is Lion King. I really wonder how.
Yeah, that one could go either way, I think. Yeah, that one could go either way. All right. So that was the box office from the past couple weekends. Two main releases coming out this week. Kraven the Hunter, 2 hours, 7 minutes, rated R. Main star here is Aaron Taylor Johnson playing Kraven. The plot here is Kraven the Hunter is a visceral, action-packed origin story of how and why one of Marvel's most iconic villains came to be. Aaron Taylor Johnson plays Kraven, a man whose complex relationship with his ruthless father, Nikolai Kravinoff, played by Russell Crowe, starts him down a path of vengeance with brutal consequences, motivating him to become not only the greatest hunter in the world, but also the most feared. So Craven the Hunter, Aaron Taylor Johnson was there one release. The second release is Lord of the Rings, War of the Rohirrim. Two main stars here, Brian Cox and Miranda Otto is back in the Lord of the Rings series. And for this one, it's set 183 years before the events chronicled in the original trilogy of films, The Lord of the Rings, War of the Rohirrim, tells the fate of the House of Helm Hammerhand, the legendary king of Rohan. A sudden attack by Wolf, a clever and ruthless Dunleading lord seeking vengeance for the death of his father, forces Helm and his people to make a daring last stand in the ancient stronghold of the Hornburg, a mighty fortress that will later become known as Helm's Deep. Finding herself in an increasingly desperate situation, Hera, the daughter of Helm, must summon the will to lead the resistance against the deadly enemy intent on their total destruction. For those of you who have not seen a trailer, don't know, this is an animated movie, and done in the style of Japanese anime. It is done by a Japanese director. And so it is not a live action film. It is an animated film in the style of anime. For those of you who are curious about this one. What do you make of these two?
I can't say that I'm really interested in Craven because I have bad experiences with Sony Marvel movies.
Some successes and a number of brutal failures.
Venom has been okay.
Venom has been relatively successful.
However, Morbius also exists.
Morbius.
And Bad Spider-Woman.
Yeah.
I mean, Madam Web.
Boy, they were some of the roughest.
Yeah.
The roughest. And this character would seem to be closer to the camp. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
Like, it could go the Venom route, or it could go the Morbius. I don't know. It's really up in the air with this one.
Yeah, Morbius, Madam Web, and Craven are all like lesser characters that people don't know a lot about. So I'm concerned it's going to be more in the not great area.
Yeah.
So sometime we'll have to discuss who is a greater actor of harm to superheroes, DC or Sony Marvel.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Now, Sony Marvel did put out some of the Spider-Man movies. They were really good. But outside of that, it's been pretty rough.
Yeah.
It's been pretty rough. Yeah, it's not hitting me like, oh yeah, this is gonna be fun. This is gonna be interesting. I gotta go see it. It's not hitting me like that. I wonder what this means for Aaron Taylor Johnson. Because we talked a while back about him potentially being in consideration for Bond. I wonder, this is one of the first films in which he is like the lead, and they're pushing this film pretty hard to some extent. It's getting the IMAX showings. It's kind of the lead of the new movies of the weekend. I wonder if this is kind of a cameo to see if there is a box office draw for Aaron Taylor Johnson.
It's even got a horrible commercial featuring the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, those crossovers are really weird. There's been some really weird crossovers. Like the whole Megan Thee Stallion Gladiator was really bizarre. Yeah.
And as far as the Lord of the Rings, War of the Rohirrim goes, it's something I'm very interested in seeing, but it's something that I feel like I don't necessarily have to go to the theater to see. Like, I feel like I will absolutely see it at some point, but I don't know if I really want to invest the time to go see it in the theater.
Yeah. I can't tell you, I have a high level of disappointment that this is being done in the format it's being done. One, because it would make a fantastic live action movie. Secondly, I don't like Japanese anime. I don't. And this very specifically, I really hate the drawing style. I don't like it. I just visually, I don't like the drawing style, which is why I'm never into anime. So putting something I would have high levels of interest in in a format I have no interest in really has me conflicted because I want to see this story, but I'm having a hard time getting past the format with which it's being told. And so I don't know where I'm at with this film. I don't know if I'm going to go see it in theaters. I don't know if I'm just going to wait for it to come out and then maybe try to watch it later. I don't know. But yeah, so trying to separate my interest level from the format's been tough for me on this one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I don't know what that means. Yeah. Do you think either one of them will do well? Let's say $50 million is the base.
I don't think either of them gets to $50 million.
That would be my guess too.
Maybe one of them gets to 40.
Which one?
I think out of the two, Craven has more of a chance.
I think you're probably right.
But I don't think it's going to be a super great weekend for them.
I don't think it is either. I think the other three are still going to hang in there and hold high. So I think maybe one of them comes in third. We'll see.
Yeah, I think Moana 2 will probably be number one again.
I would think the order stays the same. Moana 2, Wicked, and then it may be maybe Craven and then Gladiator, or might still be Gladiator again. No,
we'll see.
We'll see. All right, let's move on to our discussion. And Rob is going to bring us our discussion topic for today.
So we've got a couple of things. The first is a little game, since Ryan made me look like a fool playing a game a few weeks ago. I'm going to try and make it not quite as hard for him, but we'll see. So I was very interested and curious in looking up what movies have come out that have been popular in the box office that have also been popular as a musical and a book.
Okay.
So there's not a lot of those.
It's the threefold.
But it has to be all three.
Movie, musical, book. Okay.
Not necessarily in that release order, but
sure.
At some point they have to have been in literature, in the form of literature, whether it's a short story or a book, Broadway musical, and a motion picture.
All right.
In some cases, more than one motion picture version of the thing. So what I thought I would do is I came up with 4 here.
Okay.
And I came up with 3 words associated with each.
Okay.
And so I will give you one word at a time.
Okay. And
see how quick you're able to guess.
So I'm guessing one of these, and if I can guess it off the first word, and if I don't, you give me a second.
Correct.
Word. Okay.
Gotcha. Up to 3 words.
Sure.
So in my opinion, the words get progressively more obvious.
Okay.
The further along we get. So bear in mind you're keeping in your focus here something that was a book, a musical, and a movie.
Okay.
So that kind of narrows it down.
It does.
The first word for the first entrant is rampart.
Rampart. Do you want to do Les Mis?
Correct.
Okay.
The other 2 words were revolution in France. So good job on that one.
Nice.
The second one, the first word is road.
Road. Oh. I'm gonna go. What is it? I know. What is the stupid title of that? The Wizard of Oz.
Correct. Which is like
why can't
interesting considering we're also talking about Wicked, which is based on the Wizard of Oz. The other 2 words I had for that were tornado and slippers.
Okay.
Okay. The third one might be a little harder.
Okay.
Maybe.
Okay.
Oppression.
Oppression. Oppression. Gone with the Wind?
No.
No.
Second word, match.
Match. Oppression. Match. Match is interesting because I can think of like multiple definitions of match. So we're talking probably a marriage. I'm thinking oppression, match. No, give me a third one.
Tradition.
See, it's telling me on the same lines. Tradition. Okay, Fiddler on the Roof.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. And the last one I have, the first word is hidden.
Hidden.
So it's a very unfair word. That's like very,
Hidden.
very opaque.
Okay.
The second word I have is governess.
Governess. Okay. Hidden and governess. Governess. Give me a second on this one. No, give me the third one.
Farewell.
Poppins?
No.
What?
But close.
Um,
Same actress.
oh. Oh, what? I'm thinking along the same lines. I'm just not, what is it?
The Sound of Music.
Sound of Music.
Yes.
Yeah. Mhm.
So those words again
Yeah.
were hidden because they were hiding the kids and the
Yeah.
family from the Nazis.
Yeah.
Governess because that was Julie Andrews' character in the movie. And then I actually had Edelweiss written as the third word originally, but I was like, that's way too obvious. He's going to get that.
Actually, I would not have.
Okay.
No, that word means nothing to me.
Because that's one of the songs in the musical.
Okay. You know me, and I'm not. I am not a big musical guy, so I was pleased that I did as well.
Yeah, you did pretty well with those, though. All right. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about, because I was very curious when the movies that came out in the box office did so well.
Yeah.
I was like, these movies, obviously, Wicked has been talked about being made a movie for a while.
Yeah.
Gladiator 2 has been talked about being a made movie since the first one came out.
Yeah.
In 2000. Moana 2 was actually never supposed to be a movie. It was going to be a miniseries on Disney Plus. And so I was like, what's the deal with the production history of these movies? Because that's something that I don't think a lot of people really think about. They just like, oh, it's out. Let's go see it.
Yeah.
Very briefly on Moana 2, January of 2024 is when Disney decided to pivot from this being a 6-episode streaming series on Disney Plus to be a movie.
Wow.
So they basically went
decision.
They went in and told all their animators, you need to change direction. This is not going to be a miniseries anymore because we like what we're seeing of this and people's reaction to the original on our streaming service. We're going to make it a movie. And so much of the production work was done ahead of time that they were able in 10 months to get it moved from a miniseries to a full theater production.
And that is a very different way of telling stories. So that was not a small feat to do that. Yeah.
And has made a lot of money.
Yes.
Because of that decision.
That was a good decision.
Which they would not have made.
They would not have made
even close to
some $1 million worth of value throwing that out on Disney. No way.
And now I would say that it's very likely at some point we'll see a Moana 3.
Oh, undoubtedly.
Because of this. So that's even expounded upon by that.
Yeah.
So the movie Wicked, I talked about things that were a book, a musical, and a movie. The book came out in 1995, and the book was called Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West. And a lot of people reacted very viscerally and strongly to this book, some positively, some negatively, overwhelmingly positive reception to the book, which spawned the musical. However, one thing that I found out that's very interesting is Wicked was supposed to be a movie before it was a musical. So the movie, the book was optioned back in 2000. See, it was optioned like around 2000.
Okay.
By Universal, and they were going to make a movie out of it. And Steven Schwartz, the guy who wrote the songs for Wicked, basically called up the guy who was in charge of this production and begged him, like, let me do this. This needs to be musical. Because he said he had friends who told him about the book, and he read the book, and he said a bell went off in his head. And he thought, oh man, I have this idea and this idea and this idea. And you can see if you are a fan of the musical, you can see very clearly that like there is something to this, that like someone felt very passionate about this material. And the musical is very different in some ways from the book. And this bears in mind the question that we've wrestled with before. And I think I've slowly moved to the point where I'm no longer judging a book and a movie against each other because they are two different forms of art. Because I think if you read the book 1st and watch the movie, and the movie doesn't have something in the book that you wanted, you're going to be disappointed. But if you watch the movie first and then read the book, and the book has something in it that's extra that you didn't think belonged, you're going to be disappointed in the book.
Or sometimes they change things, and then you don't feel like you adjust to the book as well. But I mean, this is a whole nother discussion about why they make the choices they make when converting a book to a movie.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that a little bit before.
But I think more and more I'm coming to the belief that you need to be able to judge them separately from each other. Because
totally.
It's unfair to judge them against each other. So when they did decide to make this a musical, it had ridiculous box office success. There are 3 musicals that have made $1 billion on Broadway: The Phantom of the Opera, The Lion King, and Wicked. Those are the 3.
Wow.
It started out doing previews in San Francisco back in 2003. One really, really cool thing about the movie is that John Chu, the guy who directed the movie, saw Wicked in San Francisco in 2003. So he's been a fan of this since it started.
Interesting.
Which is very cool. And it was his passion to be able to direct this movie when it became a movie. And
I almost thought he would have had to, because I don't remember him directing other things. So
so they started getting some momentum behind this movie. 2016, they announced it was going to be in 2 parts, which somehow I didn't realize. But all the way back then, they said it was going to be in 2 parts. August 2018, they announced that it was being put on hold because they were releasing a different musical in the theater in 2019. Cats took the place of Wicked on the theater release schedule.
We all know how well that went.
Cats did not have the reception that Wicked has had. There was a Wicked reception to Cats, but not in a good way.
That was the creepiest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, I could not stand watching the trailer for that thing. Oh gosh, who is going to go see this? This is ridiculous.
So Cats was like an absolute failure, and people weren't sure, like, are we even going to be able to do a musical?
Side note:
this scope again.
Taylor Swift was in Cats. What do you think it would have been like if they released Cats now, given where Taylor Swift is at?
I don't know, but I'm glad they didn't, because
I think everyone is glad they didn't. I think Taylor is glad that they didn't. So anyway.
And then COVID-19 happened.
It did.
So Wicked got pushed back even further. And then the theater writers and actors strikes happened. And Wicked got pushed back even further. So this movie was in production for a solid 7 years. Before it was finished.
That's crazy.
So John Chu, one of the things, I found this hilarious. So he said he kept on calling Universal and asking, like, so what's happening with this movie? Because it's not made yet. And they kept on telling him there's a director attached. We'll let you know. Finally, there came a glimmer of hope when Universal inquired about his availability for an undisclosed project. And I think this might be the best movie trivia fact I've ever read in my entire life. I asked them, does it rhyme with picked? And they said yes.
Nice.
And so from then on, John Chu was on board to direct Wicked, and they filmed the 2 parts. I think they filmed all of this together. I actually don't.
I believe they did. Okay. Yeah, I believe they did. From what I understand.
So far, it's grossed 455.6 as of the article I'm reading. It grossed 455.6 million worldwide. The 2 movies together cost $300 million to make. One thing I should note about Gladiator 2 is that it has made a lot of money worldwide.
Way more money worldwide.
So just looking at the numbers for Gladiator 2 domestically would be a mistake, because it's made a ton overseas. Now going into Gladiator 2, first of all, do you have any thoughts on that journey for Wicked. Other than, I mean, we've talked through some of this with the actor strike, and obviously we started the movie podcast during COVID. But it's really cool for me to see some of these projects, coming to fruition after going through those.
Yeah, it's always fascinating because we've been doing this long enough that we've gotten to see a number of ones that we talked about the announcement of the movie being put into production and then gotten to see the movie. And so it's interesting to see some of these ones that had significantly longer journeys finally come to fruition. And sometimes you wonder, I think it came out at the perfect time. I don't know if it would have had, if it had gotten released last year, I don't know that it has the same effect. If it got released the year before, I don't know if it has the same effect. The fact that it got delayed until now, it's kind of fascinating.
Yeah, and as far as John Chu goes, he's really the only other two things he's been involved with that were popular. He directed Crazy Rich Asians, which did pretty well, and he directed In the Heights, Lin-Manuel Miranda's musical, the new version of that, which didn't have a ton of commercial success, but I watched that movie and I thought it was really good too. So he's shown that he can direct a musical in movie format. Gladiator 2, we move on to. Ever since the first one came out in 2000, there was talk of a sequel.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know this or not, but there was a full script written for a sequel as early as 2003.
I did not know
Gladiator 2.
I did not know that.
That's 21 years ago.
That is a long time ago.
Gladiator 2 was in development and halted development when DreamWorks was sold to Paramount in 2006.
Okay.
So there was already actually movement on producing this movie, getting filming started, getting things ready here. And then Paramount took over, which is probably a good thing considering the script.
Okay. Okay.
I don't even know. I read this and I just kind of it's very interesting because it's a lot different from the script that we ended up with for Gladiator 2. At least I'm assuming so. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm guessing the script is not this because Nick Cave was commissioned to write a script for Gladiator 2.
Nick Cave.
Yes.
Interesting.
Okay, now I've read this to myself and to some other people, and it's killed me every single time. Okay. So I hope you're prepared for this.
Well, let's do it.
So the spec script for Gladiator was under the working title Christ Killer.
Oh, okay. All right. Where are we going with this? Okay. All right.
Cave described this plot, and reading this directly from the article because I couldn't make this up, as a deities versus deity versus humanity story. The story involved Maximus in purgatory, who is resurrected as an immortal warrior of the Roman gods.
Oh my.
Maximus is sent back to Earth and tasked with ending Christianity by killing Jesus and his disciples. As Christianity was draining the power of the ancient pagan gods. I don't know about you, but this seems like maybe a little bit off the rails from where the original Gladiator was going. It gets better. During his mission, Maximus is tricked into murdering his own son. Cursed to live forever, Maximus fights in the Crusades, World War II, and the Vietnam War, with the ending revealing that in the present day, the character now works at the Pentagon. This sounds kind of like X-Men Origins Wolverine, but done in a much grander scale with real people. The script was rejected after Steven Spielberg told Ridley Scott it wasn't going to work, especially as Cave had written something too grand due to his theater work.
I'm not sure grand is the right word to throw out there.
So can you
pathologically insane? Can you just
confirm me that this is not how Gladiator 2 actually ended up being?
No, it isn't. No, not even a little bit.
There's no reality in which this movie is grounded.
There's no reality in that movie whatsoever. My goodness. It's like take a movie, hollow it out, throw whatever bizarre thing you want in there. That is crazy. That is insane.
So in 2019, the script came out with the plot line taking place 25 to 30 years after the first film, which seems more in line with
That is much more
where
in
we
line.
ended up with. What's very interesting is Chris Hemsworth, while working on the movie Thor: Love and Thunder with Russell Crowe, actually approached Russell Crowe and said, "Hey, I have some ideas about Gladiator." I don't know if any of those things like ended up being involved in where they ended up with things, but that was pretty interesting to me. In 2021, they announced the script was being worked on again, and that they would finalize working on it while production on Napoleon was happening. And in November 2023, David Scarpa, who worked with Ridley Scott on Napoleon, was announced as the rewriter of the script.
Okay, Napoleon stunk, but okay.
So
there, okay.
So this movie like took 24 years.
Yeah.
To get to. Now, I've not seen the movie yet. Briefly, we've talked about some of your ideas of it.
Yeah.
Now, what I would want to ask you, not your overall impression of like the movie as a whole, but specifically the script, the writing. Do you think the writing was true to the themes of the original? That's really what we're getting at here with this production, because a lot of production is, especially in something original. I mean, less so with Wicked, because Wicked, you're going off of source material. Gladiator, they're coming up with something brand new.
Yeah. So, yes and no. Inevitably, there's a level where you have to. A movie ends here. You can rarely start a sequel here and then go here and then end here. So they have to start down here. So the question always is, and if you're listening to this, if you end a movie on a high note, you can almost never start the second movie on a high note. You have to start at a lower point. And so inevitably the question comes in, does where the second movie starts and that low point somehow invalidate the high point of the ending of the previous movie? And that is a question. I would say no, but I do think it left something, the second movie left something to be desired in not explaining that better than it did. So I do think in general, it kept some of the themes in the movie. I just don't think it did it as well. So I don't think it was, it just went off the rails from the first movie. By no means. It just wasn't done as well.
Simple yes or no question as someone who has unequivocally stated their love for Gladiator.
Yeah.
Like it's if it's not your number one all-time movie, it's very close. Did they need to make Gladiator 2?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't think they did.
Was it a mistake to make Gladiator 2?
No. For me, no.
Okay.
There are some people, our mutual friend Steve routinely will not see sequels to movies. Like he's famously never seen the rest of the Matrix movies or things like that. For that reason, like he doesn't like that. He did see Gladiator 2, by the way, but I am not a person who will feel if I don't like the second movie that invalidates the first movie. I'm not like that. So no, my general thing is it is a good to at times very good action movie, but it is not an all-time epic, So while I'd say it didn't need to be made, I'm not disappointed that it was.
Yeah. Well, I hope everyone who is listening to this found this insightful. I think a lot of times Ryan and I have an opportunity to maybe spend a little more time and do some more research to give you more of an idea. I mean, this is all stuff that you could find on the internet.
Yeah.
But I think part of our responsibility And what we try to provide is bringing the information to you so that you don't have to go seek it out yourself.
For sure.
And being able to bring all this together is a way we can do that, tell a story in addition to just what raw numbers say.
Definitely.
Because there's definitely a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in Wicked and Gladiator. Both, Wicked, as it starts a book in 1995, Gladiator comes out of a movie that came out in 2000. So you're looking at a generation's worth of people working on these things.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy to think about it.
Forward. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Just one point of note, we talked about Gladiator 2 having a bigger international release. So far, it's made 137 domestically. It's made 235 million internationally. So 63% of its box office haul is coming from international. Yeah. One other note before we move to our watch list, along these lines about productions and how movies are in production. We covered a couple weeks ago the trailer for Mission Impossible Final Reckoning. I saw in the last week, I saw a clip from Rebecca Ferguson. It was not a long clip, but basically explaining why she's not in the new movie. And it was really enlightening. She basically said, I'd love the character. Absolutely loved it. But the filming of Mission Impossible movies are an absolute slog. They take forever. And you have to just be on the set. Because if you remember, those of you who have been following us for a while, we did a full review of every single one of the Mission Impossible movies leading up to Dead Reckoning. And one of the things we talked about is how they were produced and all this thing. When Chris McQuarrie took over, they are very, very on the fly. They have stunts kind of planned out and they kind of write the script around the stunts. So it's very on the fly. So the cast just has to be there in case they're needed. So this can lead to long periods of time. And these movies take forever to make. Yeah. So it can lead to long periods of time where you're just sitting around. And so she's explaining this and she's like, at some point you have to question, do I want to keep working and doing other things? Or do I want to, potentially sit around the trailer for months on end, hoping that I'm needed, especially as it appeared the character was getting a smaller role and a smaller part as Dead Reckoning was going along. And she's like, look, I made 2 seasons of Silo and they're still working on this movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for her standpoint, it broke down to basically do I want to keep working and do other things, or do I want to sit around for a year and a half?
And these are the kind of things we would
for to be the 4th, 5th person.
These are kind of things we might never find out.
Yeah,
because you didn't say something like that. So in other words, it might not have been their decision. Just we're getting rid of this character. Sometimes it's the actors themselves who are involved in that process.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of a 1-in-1 because I think part of it. I don't know if her answer would have been the same if she was as integral to the movie as she had been for the previous couple movies. But as her role was diminishing in Dead Reckoning, I think that's what also triggered her. I want to do other stuff. Yeah. So just fascinating insight there. All right. We will conclude today with our watch list, movies we watched over the last week. What'd you watch?
If I remember correctly, you saw this movie close after it came out and told me I should see it. The movie Fall with the 2 girls climbing the TV tower. I actually watched it last night.
Oh, did you?
I liked it quite a bit.
Yeah,
for the kind of movie it is, because you go into it thinking, how could they possibly make an hour and 45-minute long movie about 2 girls climbing up a TV tower? But there's a lot background story that's revealed as the movie goes along, and some pretty cool effects. My greatest fear is heights, so it was actually probably scarier to me than a lot of scary movies, because I was like, oh my gosh, that's really high up there.
Yeah.
And just seeing the human element when you're faced with a no-win situation.
Yeah.
And how you cope with that situation, how they reveal what's actually happening towards the end of the movie. I thought they did a pretty good job with what they were given. I don't think it's a fantastic or great movie by any stretch, but I think it's worth watching.
It's not you look at something like that and you're like, okay, this is just going to be a terrible movie. It's not. It's not a terrible movie. It's well done for what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I went into it thinking maybe it's like along the same lines of like 47 meters down or something like that, like a movie where someone's faced with an animal disaster or something.
Yeah.
And but it did a good job of, this is a terrible pun considering what they're actually doing in the movie, but staying grounded in the reality of interpersonal dynamics.
Yeah.
In a way that a lot of those movies don't pull off very well. It's a reason why I really liked when he talked about disaster movies, why my favorite disaster movie is Greenland, because that was a movie that did that very well. Like actually making you care about people for the people they are.
Yeah.
And I mean, in Fall, I'm not going to give away the twists here in Fall, but it's actually some pretty heavy stuff with the two girls involved and stuck at the top of this tower that I did not see coming, and seeing them work through that was pretty powerful.
Yeah.
So that's the movie I watched this week.
Yeah. Nice.
And that movie is on Peacock.
That sounds right.
Let me just double. I'm gonna say that, and if it's incorrect, I will correct myself.
Okay.
So you can go ahead and.
So 2 movies since we last recorded. For me, I did get to see Bonhoeffer in theaters, and I wanted to see it. It just wasn't working. I finally got around to see it in theaters. It is a fascinating story. It's really, really interesting. Bonhoeffer, a trained pastor who was in Nazi Germany, who joined up with the resistance in Nazi Germany and felt like it was his duty both to call out the German church's complicity in aligning with Hitler and actually work on plots to assassinate Hitler. So he's a fascinating character. He's a scholar. He wrote huge amounts of books that are still around and still well read today. And it's fascinating from the standpoint of like, say the theory of the idea of non-resistance versus when you're faced with it in reality, and how do you make those calculations? How does someone's personal journey affect these type of things, and when is the right time to say things and when is it not the right time to say things? So it really is an interesting, and he's a fascinating character. In terms of the negatives, sometimes the dialogue was not written in an incredible manner. Like there's some, you can tell sometimes there's some pieces of dialogue were just kind of like, that could have been written better, or that was a little like, I don't know. But the storyline is great, and the story is really interesting. Then today I saw The Return, and The Return was an interesting story. It stars Ralph Fiennes and Juliette Binoche, and the basic idea is Odysseus finally returning to Ithaca post sacking of Troy, post the Odyssey, and he's finally, as like an old man, is like winds up back home, and what they find is like his homeland has been decimated in the interim. His wife is the queen, in lack of there being a lack of a king, has caused lots of chaos, and they're basically a bunch of like hordes of like eager men trying to persuade her to pick them as a husband to try and salvage things. And this is the state at which he winds up on the shores of Ithaca. And the movie really deals with the return is kind of both metaphorical and physical. And there were physical because he's finally back from his journeys. Metaphorical in the sense of, after you go to war, after you've seen and done the things you did in war, and then have the experiences you have, you are not the same person. How then do you return to your old life, knowing that you're not the same person that you were when you left, and not the same person people are expecting? So it really does explore that kind of idea. And so for that part of it is really interesting and really fascinating. This might actually appeal to you, but I think the pacing was slow. Like the pacing was so I do feel like that was an issue. That was what holding it back from like gripping you and doing this. Also, Ray Fine has very few lines of dialogue for being the main character of the story. He's very quiet and brooding as playing Odysseus, and so he does a great job with his performances. I just like he doesn't talk much, so you don't really get as much of a sense of when you don't have a lot of lines. The lines you do have to be incredibly powerful lines and have to be incredibly well delivered. I think he did that occasionally, and sometimes it didn't, and so you're left with a little bit of like you wanted to get into the character more than they got you into the character's head. Then they let you in. Like you have to fill in the gaps a little bit, which you can do. It just takes it from being really good to just being, yeah, that was decent. That was good. So yeah, The Return.
All right.
All right. And that is the show, everyone. Thank you for tuning into Film for Fans. Visit filmforfans.com, like, subscribe, tell your friends. Until next time, enjoy the movies.